Welcome to the first post-keynote session for your Ignite experience. I'm Brian Benz. I work for Microsoft Open Technologies, and I specialize in open source on Azure and devices. Our whole group does, actually. And as an offshoot of that, we've been working with Oracle and IBM and a few other people on partnering with them. So how many people here are interested in the Oracle-Microsoft partnership? Okay, just a couple. How about IBM? Oracle, IBM. Okay, a couple again. And the Java stuff, the Eclipse, IntelliJ. Okay, a few more for that. Okay. All right, I'll try and gauge my slides accordingly here and my demos. So what I want to talk to you about today is a few things. It's pretty cool. I joined Microsoft a couple of years ago, and even back then, 5-10 years ago even, you wouldn't have thought that one day Microsoft would have even 5 years ago, I guess, Microsoft would have a platform that actually you could run Oracle or IBM software on, and that Oracle or IBM would agree to run on that platform. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of work that's been done, and a lot of things have opened up. Actually, my whole group, we were the group at Microsoft who specialized in open source. And now the entire company is talking about open source. So we're actually involved in a lot more things than we used to be. And it's good to see. It's good to see it at Microsoft. So I just wanted to show you this. This is, it's our open cloud. How many people know that we have that we run Linux? I'm guessing pretty much this whole crowd does. On Azure, we run Linux. We actually have a lot of open source software, including Java. We run MySQL. We have a provider that you can run MySQL from called ClearDB. We have a Hadoop distribution run by Hortonworks called HD Insight. We have a number of things. We've been working closely with Chef and Puppet for deployments and managing DevOps. In terms of the things that are specific for today, we've been working with IBM on DB2, WebSphere, and MQ. We've been working with Oracle on getting Oracle DB, WebLogic, and the Oracle JDK for Java running on Azure. So we've actually been doing a lot of things just to open up the platform. And the whole idea here is if you have something that you want to run on the cloud, you should be able to run it, and not only run it, but it should perform best and be the easiest to deploy on our cloud platform. That's our whole goal for the open cloud. So Satya himself has actually said, here's a quote from him, we've made sure that Azure is a very open platform. It's not just about .NET and Windows. I go to a lot of Java events and things, and they see us there, and they're wondering why we're there. And they're saying, well, that's fine, but we don't really use Windows. And we tell them about Linux, and they're very impressed. And we benefit a lot from low expectations, which is great. It's great for me. We have some great conversations. So anyway, so what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the things we've done with partners. And we've sort of taken an approach like you would with Uber or Airbnb or a few of the other shared platforms that used to be out there. You don't have to buy things, you can rent them. And in this case, you can rent software from IBM, you can rent software from Oracle. You can use our tools to help deploy things out to Azure. So some of the advantages are we have immediate resources. If you want to fire up an Oracle DB instance, you could have it running. It's 1:30 right now. You could have it running by 2 o'clock, and you could be deploying apps and testing things. You've got a choice of platforms. We support a number of platforms, including Linux and Windows, and reduce costs when you actually rent versus buying. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is the Azure portal. If I go new, virtual machine from gallery. So this is the Azure portal itself. You see all the usual suspects you'd expect here. But down here you see some things that you might not be familiar with. We have 4 endorsed versions of Linux. And by endorsed, we mean that we actually provide support for them and we've tested things. You can run other platforms, Debian, Red Hat if you wish. Those are not supported, but we have Linux and Windows servers that you can run things on. And by that, we mean pretty much anything you want to put on them. So we've got Ubuntu servers, we've got CoreOS, CentOS, OpenLogic, SUSE and SUSE Enterprise. Those are our Linux offerings. Down here you'll see the Oracle. So for Oracle we have JDKs, we have WebLogic servers, a few other things. All I have to do to create one of these, if I go in here, if I want to create an Oracle DB on Windows Server 2012, click. Oh, it has special pricing information. That's right. I'll explain the licensing and the pricing a little bit, but for now, you get the idea. You basically go in here, you can select a gallery image, you can create it, and you can be up and running with a DB server, Oracle DB, DB2, etc., or a WebSphere or WebLogic server, or as well as MQ or a JDK virtual machine, all up and running with just a few clicks. How many people here have heard of VM Depot? Nobody. Okay. Okay, this is good. You're going to like this. How many people here use Linux in their daily operations? Okay, a few. Great. You're going to like this. This is something if you want to start playing around with Linux, or you have Linux servers that you want to use. VM Depot, vmdepot.msopentech.com is the site. And we actually have about 700 Linux virtual machines pre-configured. These are virtual machine images pre-configured with various types of software. And you can actually deploy these instantly out to Azure. And there's a couple ways to do this. So here's a Tomcat server. This is a good one to show you. So there's a deployment script, and what the deployment script does, whoops, what happened there? Let me try that again. All right. There's Tomcat. So let's say I want to fire up a Tomcat server on Ubuntu. That's what we've got here. I click this deployment script. I make the lawyers happy by saying I agree. Pick something, a location. We've got several locations you can actually deploy this VM out to. This is a script. You can cut and paste this. You put your subscription-specific information in there, and you can actually deploy that out to Azure. And it'll be a Linux virtual machine. It'll be a Ubuntu machine configured with Tomcat. Some other things get very complex. There's many different ways to configure these things, but what we do basically is we have ourselves and vendors who put these together, like I said, about 700 images. They test them, they make sure they're working, and they publish them out here. You can actually publish your own as well. And if you're curious about this script, how many people are familiar with the command line interface, CLI? Not PowerShell, but CLI. Okay, a few of you. So the others, so basically what this script is, it's a command line interface. And if you're familiar with PowerShell, this will be very easy to use. This is a download page that we have for Azure. These are all the SDKs. I'll cover these a little bit in detail later. But the command line tools here, we've got PowerShell. We also have the command line interface. And basically what this does is it allows you to manipulate servers on Azure. There's management services there. You can deploy things. You can actually manage things you've already deployed, and a lot of other things. It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you can run it from a Linux server or a Linux client, a Mac or Windows machine. It allows you to deploy things out to Azure. But if you don't want to figure out the scripts and you don't want to download the CLI, there's another way you can do this as well. And that's in the new portal. How many people have seen the new portal versus the old portal? Just a couple? Okay. So this is the new Azure portal that we've got. It's at portal.azure.com versus where you normally go, which is windowsazure.com. If I go in here and I say, well, actually, I'll go to the marketplace and I type in Oracle. It brings up all of the images that I just showed you in the old portal. It also has, if I say load more, has a few other things that the old portal doesn't have. So, for example, if I want to build a mobile app, let's say I want to take a Oracle DB that I already have, and I want to add mobile capability on top of it. We have a mobile app development server that you can use here, and you actually deploy this as a service, and it actually integrates. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah. It actually integrates with SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, MongoDB, and a few other things. You can actually quickly and easily get a mobile application built, and that is based on, let me get back to what I showed you earlier in the downloads here. I said I'd get back to these. If you look here, we've got a mobile SDK that you can use. So this is actually a service built on top of the mobile SDK. And it allows you to access Azure services, and it also allows you to access data repositories in the back end, like SQL Server, Oracle, et cetera, et cetera. So that's some of the new features of the new portal. But I digress. All right, let's get back to normal size. What I mentioned before was you can actually deploy these virtual machine images from VM Depot out without using the script. So if I type Tomcat here, no, that's not what I did. Tomcat. Yeah, there we go. So there's the same Tomcat server. If I hit enter, it shows all the different options we have for that. I can create that here. I can just give it a host name in a second. Click, click. It's taking a second to get everything working. There we go. Okay, cat ignite 15. And then I have to type in a username and a password, of course, for, I'm going to type one I can actually get into. You choose your sizing, a few other things. You can set up resource groups here. You can do a number of things. And then when I hit create, it's actually going to go ahead and it's going to create that Tomcat server for me. And when this animation stops, the Tomcat server will be up and running, and you can actually start using it. Same goes for the Oracle or IBM images that I actually haven't shown you the IBM images yet. And one of the reasons I wanted to show you the new portal is that the IBM images are only on the new portal. If you look in the old portal for IBM, you won't actually find anything there. We've only gone with the new portal for these. So for the IBM images, we have IBM MQ, as I mentioned. We've got WebSphere. We've got DB2. We've got a couple other interesting little features here as well that aren't part of the IBM offerings, but we have an MQ connector and a DB2 connector. These are ODBC connectors that you can use and build into your applications. So if you have a DB2 instance on-premise, you want to put it on the cloud quickly, there's a couple of different options you can do with that. You can actually package it up as a VHD, and I'll cover this in more detail later. Send it out to Azure, and start running it. If you want to connect to a .NET application that uses ODBC, use the connector there for DB2. And you can write a .NET application using a web app or something like that. So I'll cover that in a bit. So that's just showing you a little bit about the ways you can actually deploy things from IBM, Oracle, and VM Depot. So a little bit about the Oracle and Microsoft partnership. So full support for Oracle software. Software is actually certified by Oracle. And what does that mean? Let's see here. There's the Oracle explanation. So Oracle and Microsoft actually worked together, and they actually did, in fact, test and support this. Where's the word certify here? Yeah. Oracle is now extending that support, providing certification and support for Oracle middleware, et cetera, et cetera. And what that means is basically that they have actually tested this, and they're comfortable with supporting it at a high level. If you use Oracle software on Azure, we have a support group. At Microsoft will be your first line of support if you're using our images on Azure. And I'll explain the difference in a minute. And otherwise, Oracle actually fully supports these as well. So we also have licensed mobility. So we have our own images that I just showed you. Those gallery images there are pay-as-you-go images, which means that you actually pay per minute for the licenses. These are some of the validated products that I showed you earlier that they've actually tested. So they've actually tested all these and certified them. And that's on Windows and on Azure, running Windows or Linux. And I showed you this as well, the pre-configured VM images. So some of the things to consider, we're not really recommending this for massive data centers yet, although some people have used the D series recently, and this is unofficial. This is just a customer who tried this, and it worked fine. But if you have database sizes greater than 10 gigabytes for now on the system disk, we're saying don't really use those in a production environment on Azure. We're still working on some of the details and making those high performance. But if you have a dev test environment or even a minor production environment, great. I wouldn't run a massive data store on there at the moment. Standalone Oracle, we have Data Guard, which is used for backup and data protection, and then we have Golden Gate, which is used for replication as well. Those are all supported. You can capture, and I'm going to show you how to capture things and deploy it in a couple of minutes here. Let me show you right now. I'll show you the different pricing we have. So this is the virtual machine pricing from Azure. So if you just search on Azure pricing, you'll get this virtual machine. We have Windows, we have Linux, and over here there's a tab for Oracle software. If you look in Oracle software, there's the basic cores, A911. These are the new D series, and the D series is 40%, I want to say 40% faster in terms of processor, and we have local SSDs, which really makes for a high performance solution compared to the A series. Then we have the G series, which is about double the performance of the D series, and those are actually really, really good. We've had some really good results with those. Some faster SSDs as well. So you can find the details of all the configurations and the pricing there. Well, so the WebLogic server itself, just want to mention that as well. If you're running 32-bit Oracle JDK, it won't work with Azure. The JDK in the Azure Oracle images, and those are the ones that are pay-as-you-go. I'll explain the difference in a few minutes. Are 64-bit. But that's basically all you need to know from this as well. So the IBM Microsoft partnership, this is a younger partnership than the Oracle. So we don't have as many features, we don't have as much documentation yet. We're working on getting some additional offerings, but for now we just have DB2, WebSphere Server, and MQ. And we also have built some Eclipse tooling that allows you to publish directly to WebSphere's Liberty server, and I'll show you that in a bit as well. We're also working with IBM to make .NET runtime available on the IBM cloud platform, which is Bluemix. So I showed you earlier from the new portal only, you can get to these 3 images for DB2, MQ, and WebSphere, and you also have the connectors available too. So licenses, I've been talking about licensing a little bit. These are the options for licensing, and this is for Oracle or IBM software. It's basically the same thing. Support is slightly different, and I'll talk about that. But we have the pay-as-you-go images. Those are the ones I showed you in the portal. So when you go here in the new portal, you say New, Virtual Machine, from Gallery. All the images you see here that are Oracle-based are pay-as-you-go, except for a couple, and I'll tell you what the exceptions are. And that means you're paying by the minute. If you want to use, for example, your MSDN subscription or something else to just try these out, there's one caveat that's very important. The licensing is charged separately from Azure. So even if you have some Azure credits that you want to use for whatever reason, you still have to pay for the Oracle license by the minute to use those. The actual capacity on Azure will be free. Well, it'll be included in your credits, not free, but it won't be. But the licensing won't be. So that's an important distinction. You can bring your own license and use a pre-configured VM. And there's a couple of images here that I want to show you. Most of these are on Windows. The Windows images in this portal are pay-as-you-go. But down here, a little further, there are a couple of Oracle database images on Linux. These Oracle database images on Linux are for bring your own license purposes. We've created these and pre-configured them. Actually, Oracle and Microsoft put them together. But these aren't pay-as-you-go images. These are actually images that you're expected to have a license for. So you can bring your own license. There's license portability. You can bring it from on-premise to the cloud. But for the Linux versions of these, it's not pay-as-you-go. You have to have your own license. And there's a couple of just plain Oracle Linux images here as well, which don't have anything on them except Linux. And then you can use a license. You can bring your own license and build your own VM as well. So if you want to just create a Linux or Windows server, fire it up, and they make sure that you have your own Oracle licenses that you want to run on there. That's, of course, fine, too. As I mentioned earlier, for Linux, anything you want to put on Azure is available. So those are our 3 options. Number 3, use a license-included VM image, pay-as-you-go. Bring your own license. Use a pre-configured VM. And that's just for Oracle, by the way. The IBM, we just have the pay-as-you-go images pre-configured on Azure. Or you can bring your own license and build your own VM. So why would you want to do which option? If you need a server for a week, an hour, a month, and you don't want to negotiate a new contract with Oracle or IBM, you can use one of our pay-as-you-go images. That's a really good option. If you already have excess Oracle or IBM images or licenses, then you can move some of your, you can use a VM, move some of your licenses out to Azure for that. So, dev test environments are good for license included. Backup and disaster recovery. If you're moving to a new system, if you're moving to a new version of Oracle DB or DB2 or something like that, you can back up your current system in its current state on Azure and then upgrade on-premise, and you'd have a backup somewhere. You didn't have to buy a new server to get that safe backup. If you have deployments that have sporadic patterns, if you're an accounting firm and you have tax season spikes in your activity, this would be a good way to go as well. You could, for that 2-3 months period where you have that high capacity, you could move out to Azure and then move back to on-premise for your other servers. If you have smaller remote production deployments, one of the scenarios I've seen is if you're subcontracting some development overseas or to another firm, you could actually use an Azure instance for that, use that for your dev test environment, and then when it's ready, move it on-premise. Proof of concept, things like that. If you're upgrading to a new version, you could actually go out to Azure, try your apps on the new version, see if everything's working, and then upgrade on-premise. That's another option. Good fits for BYOL. The sweet spot here is if you have Azure credits for whatever reason, and you have excess licenses, basically it's not going to cost you any additional money to take your additional license, put them on Azure, and use up some of your credits. Deployments with heavy and consistent use patterns. That's another case of bringing your own license. The licenses that we have for Oracle and IBM are not discounted licenses, which your organization probably has discounts. If you want to migrate off unsupported Hyper-V instances. So here's a scenario. I'm sorry for the eye chart here. It's a hybrid cloud. And basically, down here in the bottom, we have your on-prem infrastructure. Up about on the top, we have our Azure cloud. So in this case, we've got some applications and some production. We've got desktops, of course, and some other servers that you use to integrate with these. Now, for some of your information, you can connect through VPN. You can use a gateway and a load balancer. How many people here are familiar with Traffic Manager? Okay, just a couple. So there's two basic ways to manage load on Azure. There's Traffic Manager, works on the DNS level, which means you actually use one single point of contact, one single endpoint, and that gets rerouted based on DNS and certain conditions to different locations or different servers. That's good for app level. Then we have Load Balancer, which actually manages, it's your sprayer. It basically sends things to different servers based on load. So those are some of the things. So you've got where it says Azure Gateway Load Balancer, that's where you would have Traffic Manager and or Load Balancer. So Traffic Manager is generally better for app level distribution, and Load Balancer is better for data level distribution. And up here you'd have a database tier, an application tier. These are all virtual machines that run on Azure with your Azure subscription, and you have Active Directory integration, of course, in your applications. Here's another one. So this shows you the difference more clearly between Traffic Manager and Load Balancer. So you've got your end user. This is Azure here. This is your on-premise solution. So in this case, what you'd have is a solution here where you have a web application that maybe is used for customers or for partners or external-facing site. You've got a web server. You've got Traffic Manager there. It's managing the actual web traffic coming into your application at the DNS level. You've got the IIS web. You've got a couple of app servers running on Azure that are handling WebLogic. They could be a .NET application, could be anything. And then you've got your databases that are basically managed. The load there is managed by your load balancer. Then that's unauthenticated traffic coming in from the web, accessing your application. Updating that application, you could do that on premise with different servers, with different applications, and that is authenticated through the cloud using ADFS, or any other option you want to use for authentication that Microsoft supports. And that's a good solution for events like Microsoft Ignite. The Microsoft Ignite website is not needed all year. It's basically only needed for the month before and maybe the month after, and the rest of the time it sort of sits dormant. So in this case, we've got this optimized for cloudburst, which would be high spikes in traffic, and it's fed by the back-end system, which in the case of Ignite would be feeding schedules and announcements and blogs through through the back end. So I mentioned before, there are times when you're going to want to actually publish things out, or actually migrate or deploy things from on-premise to the cloud. Here's a little diagram on how you do that. So you have your on-premise applications. Those can be virtualized using Hyper-V or not virtualized. And you've got your data. You can actually virtualize them using Hyper-V. Anything you can put on a VHD, you can run on Azure virtual machines. You can create one or more compute VMs, and you can use the load balancing options that I mentioned earlier, Traffic Manager, Load Balancer. You've got Azure Storage, which is blob storage. It's basically file system storage for accessing your applications as well. Then you can connect with applications and data on premise. And I showed you all those SDKs earlier. Now what you can do with those, where are we here? Uh-oh. There we go. So all these SDKs basically allow you to manage different services on Azure. So let's say you have a DB2 application and you want to add I mentioned the solution earlier where you could add mobile. You could also add media services. So let's say I've got a DB2 application and for some reason I want to add video handling. I want to handle media streaming and encoding and things like that. We have, I'll pick the Java SDK. If I click here. So in media services here, if I click, I'll use the media services link. Azure Media Services allows you to actually, there we go. It allows you to encode things. So if you have a video, when you load it up onto Facebook, everyone's probably done that, it actually gets encoded in 30, 40, 50, 60 different formats. And then that actually gets put into a general distribution queue, which allows it to be streamed multiple times. So 100 people are using it or 1 million people are using it. Actually have to manage that streaming so that everyone can see it at the same time. They're not waiting for someone else. So what our Azure Media Services do is that they allow you, first of all, when you send something to the media service, it encodes it for you, and it actually puts it in Azure storage, and it waits for people to actually look at it. When a client comes in, whether it's iOS or a desktop or Android or a Windows phone, it determines what the best type of video format is for that client, and then it streams it, and it handles multi-threaded streaming. It does all kinds of things for you. So basically, you don't have to actually build all this media. You can write in Java a way to encode 50, 60 different formats. You can create a way to manage streaming and set up your own service to do that, but this media services does it for you. So back to the example here. So we've got this DB2 or Oracle app or whatever app, and you want to add media services to it. If you put it on Azure, the easiest way, you can do this from on-premise as well, but the easiest way is from a virtual machine. You can write your code now, and you can put that on a virtual machine, or you can put it in a web app or a few other options, cloud services for Windows-based applications, and integrate easily with our services, like the media services I just showed you. And there's a number of services for that. The other thing is, obviously, Active Directory identity. If you're already using Active Directory identity for your application, that extends out to Azure, makes it easy to migrate things. And then you can work with common dev test frameworks, and I'll show you some of those in a minute, some of the ones you can use for Java and other tools for DevOps. And then, of course, you can access it from anywhere. It's from the web, etc. So that's just a little bit about our Oracle and IBM partnerships. Why Java on Azure? Well, as I mentioned before, we have 20% actually. This is a good number to know. 20%, and this might actually be bigger now, of our Linux, of our VMs are actually Linux VMs, running various things, MongoDB, pretty much anything you can put on a Linux VM. We have a lot of different Java server options as well. We've got Tomcat, Jetty, Glassfish, Oracle WebLogic, IBM WebSphere, and some others. Actually, you can even customize those. So I'll show you that in a minute. Here's some good news. Who would have thought this would happen? Microsoft is contributing to Java. Actually, our group contributes to Java. And what we've been doing right now is we've been looking at the Windows, how Java runs on Windows, and trying to improve it. Because any of you who've ever worked with Java on Windows versus Java on Linux, Linux tends to run a little bit better. But we're working on performance with that. So we actually found some places where things could be improved. We worked on the code, we improved that performance, and we submitted back to the JDK's, the OpenJDK JCP process, and they accepted our contribution. So we've actually contributed 2 so far. And these have been ported to 7 and 8. And first one just, basically they increase throughput when you're managing large files. So it's kind of cool though. Who would ever thought that Microsoft would be working with improving Java? Azul Systems is one of our Java partners other than Oracle. So we work with the Oracle JDKs I showed you earlier. Azul has actually built a version of the OpenJDK optimized for Windows called Zulu. And that works with Java SE 8, 7, and 6. So any of your applications you've written that run on Oracle's Java SE 8, 7, and 6 should actually run on OpenJDK as well. And we've integrated OpenJDK into our Eclipse and IntelliJ tooling. So Azul Zulu, the JDKs in Azul's Azure images. So it's just like I showed you with the gallery images for Oracle. You can go in and say create new, and it'll create a new server running Azul on Windows. Zulu is compliant with the latest SE 8, 7, and 6. They're very quick with issuing updates, and there's about 2 million people using Zulu out there at the moment. Supported platforms for Zulu are Red Hat. There's a few other Oracle and a few other Linux platforms. Of course, Windows Server, desktop, and then the Mac OS X. They tested on a whole bunch of hypervisors as well. So every time there's a new version that comes out of the OpenJDK, they do all this testing. They make sure it runs on all these platforms and that it's performant and not buggy. As I mentioned before, about 2 million people use Zulu on their applications today. One of the features of Zulu downloads is they're all 100% free. There's no registration required. There's no licensing required for that. So we also been working with Eclipse. The Eclipse Foundation. We've created this thing called the Azure Toolkit for Eclipse. Are there any people here who use Eclipse here for development and or deployment? Okay, cool. Are you using the Azure Toolkit for Eclipse? Any chance? No? Okay. This is something good to know. So it's on, and by the way, all the code that I'm showing you today, all the examples, are actually on GitHub, and they're all open source. So this is written in Java. It's open source, and you can use it. So if you actually want to build your own deployment tools, or this one doesn't do exactly what you're looking for, you can actually use the open source and adapt it. Where is the, oh, here we go. In the Eclipse Marketplace, if you just search for Azure Toolkit for Eclipse, it's right there. And Eclipse now has this cool feature, which is just drag this onto your Eclipse desktop, and it's actually going to install the toolkit for you. So we made sure that works. We tested it, and we tried it out. So what does this toolkit do? Do I have time? I have time for a demo. Let me I'll fire up my desktop here. I was going to direct you to my session on Wednesday. I still will. But I'll be covering this in more detail. But I'll show it to you real quick here. So this is our Eclipse toolkit. There we go. So what we've got here, let me go up here. I'll fire this up. For those of you who are running Java, actually, let me show you this one thing before we get started there. I've got a Tomcat application I wanted to show you. So this is an application that we wrote, and it actually uses every feature of the Java SDK. It's a Facebook slash, it's a social media application that uses Bootstrap and jQuery on the front end. It accesses the Java SDK on the back end to access every single media service that we have in the Java SDK. Or not just media service, or every Azure service that we have in the Java SDK. You can write comments, and they get posted in blob storage. I can add a photo. Let me see, pictures. Oh boy. Nobody wants to see my head. I can put a peacock picture in there. And that stores in blob storage as well. You can manage profiles and friends through Azure Tables, and we actually manage the profiles through SQL Azure, and a few other things. So there's a lot of different features here that this thing does, and you can deploy it from Eclipse. It's a Maven project. The reason why we use Maven is we had to package up a number of dependencies. There were 22 Microsoft libraries in here that are all written in Java, but there was also 30 third-party dependencies. So we use Maven to distribute the code and pull in all those dependencies when you download it locally. And once you do that, you can put it in Eclipse, and this is the Eclipse project right here. And you can create what's called a new Azure deployment project. So, 15A. And what this allows you to do is you select a number of things. You can use a JDK. You can use a JDK locally, or you can use a third-party JDK, and this is where I mentioned Azul. So Azul, we have a lot of different options, a lot of different versions, depending on what your application is compatible with. Or you can deploy from a custom download, and a custom download would be any URL or a storage account that you have on Azure as part of your subscription. And if you do this for the first time, it's going to ask you for your subscription information and download that. Why would you want to do that? Distributions. So if you have a JDK, you don't want to have to distribute it with the application every time you send it out. There's a way to actually pull that JDK out. Whenever you do the deployment, it'll say, okay, Eclipse Toolkit, go out and get my JDK from here. So in this case, I'll use a third party. I'll just use Zulu. Same with the server. Oh, I've got to accept the license agreement because I'm using it from there. So the app server, in this case, I've got Tomcat on here. Tomcat, I do. There we go. Okay. So once again, Tomcat, we've got Tomcat, Glassfish, IBM WebSphere Liberty, JBoss, and Jetty. Those are the options that you have here. And you can actually create your own version as well, for customized, and I'll go into the details of that on Wednesday, but I just want to show you the high-level stuff today. Once again, you can deploy from a custom download or storage account, so you're only distributing your app. You don't have to distribute all these dependencies. Then you can add extra WAR files here. You have session affinity, which is session persistence, essentially. There's a few slight exceptions there, but you also have Memcached compatible caching. You can do remote debugging on Linux or Windows using Eclipse. When I say finish, this is actually going to go and create a new deployment project for me. And where is that one? Ignite 2015A. When I go in here, I can actually configure multiple roles if I want to. This is worker role 1. I could actually have more roles set up. You can enable SSL and a few other things. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this toolkit. We built it. It's all open source. It's on GitHub, as I mentioned. And if I want to deploy this out, the first thing is if I'm running in Windows, I can test it locally. It also runs on Mac and Linux. You can't test it locally there yet. We're working on that. But for now, if you're running Windows with Eclipse, which actually most people are, people don't know that, but most Eclipse developers run on Windows. It's an interesting little fact. If you're running one of those, you can actually use local emulation to test this out using the Azure emulation library. And then once you've got that, you can actually just publish it to the cloud right here. If I hit that button, it's going to publish this up to a subscription of my choice out on Azure. And I'll cover that more on Wednesday. I'll give you the details of the session. It's Wednesday afternoon. I'll give it to you at the end of this session. So then we actually have an IntelliJ toolkit as well. The IntelliJ toolkit runs on Android Studio, which is what IntelliJ is based on. And it also runs on IntelliJ's IDEA, or development platform. It's newer than the Eclipse version, but it runs well as well. And that code is actually out on GitHub as well. So there's a few features are missing. I'll cover that in more detail on Wednesday as well. JetBrains, recently. So JetBrains are the people who make Android Studio and IntelliJ IDEA, the application environment for non-Android development on Java that sort of competes with Eclipse. They also have a compiling build management tool in Java. Actually, it can be used for anything, not just Java. It's written in Java. Martin Ballieu, who actually worked at JetBrains, now he works at Microsoft, on a flight into Redmond one day, had a look at the SDK and actually wrote an entire Azure tool for his TeamCity deployment tool on his flight. That's how easy it was. So he figured out the Azure SDK, and he actually wrote this on his flight in from, I think it was from Philadelphia to Redmond, but that doesn't really matter. So a couple-hour flight, 3-4 hour flight, he was able to do this. It runs on a Windows or Linux Azure VM, and it's a plugin that basically you use with TeamCity if you're using TeamCity already or you want to try it. And you can use .NET. If you use .NET, you can publish directly from on a virtual machine from Visual Studio. How many people here use Jenkins or Hudson, or just a couple? Okay, one actually. I'll go through that real quick. We have Azure Storage plugins for Jenkins and Hudson. And what these do is, if you want to try Jenkins or if you're using Jenkins, it's a very commonly used deployment tool, built-in deployment tool for Java. And we have a storage plugin which basically allows you to take any output artifacts that come out of Jenkins and publish them easily to Azure Storage. And then from there you can distribute them wherever you need to. We also have slave plugins. So the concept of Jenkins slaves on Azure is Jenkins has already created this feature, which basically allows you to create new machines that run processes on a distributed framework from Jenkins. So you've got your standalone Jenkins, which works fine. If you need more distributed processing, more power, you can actually distribute those processes across multiple machines, and you'll have a master machine which controls all the different processes, and slave machines which actually run the distributed processes for you. Well, what we've done is we've created a plugin for Jenkins that each one of those distributed processes can be its own virtual machine. And you can keep those virtual machines running, you can have them sitting and waiting, or you can shut them down depending on the options you choose in the Jenkins and the Hudson plugins. So the Hudson plugins are essentially identical. They're just for the Hudson community versus the Jenkins community. If you want to do those. I showed you the demo of Eclipse. Yeah. So that was the Eclipse toolkit. I can actually show you the IntelliJ as well. Takes a second to fire up. There we go. All right. Same idea with the plugin here. You can create a new cloud deployment project. And I won't go through all the features because it's basically identical to the ones I showed you in Eclipse. But there's a few less features here. We're still working on some of them, but it's fully functional if you're using IntelliJ IDEA or Android Studio. It's there. There's also in Android Studio some mobile-specific tools you can use as well. So I've got a few slides here that'll be published later for whenever the slides are shared, and all these links work. And it just talks about the Oracle and IBM partnerships. I've also got a number of Java reference partnerships. We've got, I put together a 5-hour Microsoft Virtual Academy course on Java on Azure, and that is the last link on here as well. It's a good thing to do if you want to start with Java on Azure. And we actually also have a number of blog posts as well. So, yeah, please do remember to evaluate this session. This is all new for Microsoft, so please do provide any information if you think anything's missing. Of course, we have questions now, but if you have any suggestions for the next time we do this, or anything you need, specific topics that you think we missed on Oracle or IBM or Java, any of these other topics, let me know. And, let me see here. Yeah, so Java and Microsoft Azure, what's new along with tips, tricks, and tools. Myself and Kunina Palagiri will be covering that on Wednesday at 3:15 to 4:30. So if you have interest in Java, please do come along to that. And on that note, we'll take some questions. Yes. If you have questions, they're streaming this, and it's being recorded as well. So if you could ask on the mic. Thanks.
Is there a time frame for supporting OEL on Azure?
What's OEL again? Sorry.
Oracle Enterprise Linux?
Oracle Enterprise Linux. I don't think we have a timeline for that at the moment. Sorry. We do have Oracle Linux, if you notice, that's in the portal, but we don't have Oracle Enterprise Linux running on Azure. I can check and get back to you if you need. I'm not aware of any timeline for that at the moment. Any other questions? There must be more questions. There's mics up here as well. Either way.
Well, maybe you can clarify options for the round trip. We try in, we move in, we say try Oracle, and then we, for whatever reason, we change our mind and want to kind of in-source it back.
Oh, coming back from, let's see. So what you're saying is if you have, let's say you're moving out to Azure for whatever reason, and you want to move some or all of that back to on-premise?
Yeah, I mean, I used Oracle as a specific use case, yes.
Yeah, sure. No, I can cover that. Let's go back to one of the diagrams I had there. So in that case, you would want to do, back up here. So you see here we've got virtualized applications on the left. So what you want to do here actually, once you create the Hyper-V VHD files, .vhd files, those can run on Azure VMs. Anything you put in a VHD can run on Azure VMs. That can also be virtualized on Windows locally. And that can be anything that you want to run on Windows. We also have options for Docker. I haven't checked the schedule, but I'm pretty sure they have some Docker sessions here. So I would check those Docker sessions as well, because that's going to be another solution for, Docker's a new container technology you've probably heard about, that you can actually run different operating systems inside of, actually you're running on top of operating systems, but they're portable containers, so you could take them and put them on Azure and put them back on Windows. And that's what we're working on. That's the goal for that. So yeah, virtualized applications would be your solution there. Would be if you want to take something, let's say you've got a number of servers and you want, using my tax example before, you've got a number of servers for tax time. You want to have a burst of activity. You don't want to buy all these servers. You can actually take those, you can virtualize everything locally, take it out to Azure, handle the extra capacity, and then maybe archive that and put it back locally on virtualized servers until next year. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah, please, no, please. We have lots of time, so.
Are all these available to the new Microsoft Azure stack?
The new Microsoft Azure stack,
Yeah, like the on-premise Mac.
the one announced today.
Yeah,
I'd like to say yes. I've never been tested, though. I'm pretty sure they are, though. I mean, the whole idea is everything runs on the local stack that would run on Azure. So I'm going to assume they do, but no one's tested the Oracle stuff on that yet. But I'm assuming it works. Yeah. All right, well, if there's no other questions, let me know. I'll be around, and please don't forget to evaluate us as well. We've got to make sure that we cover the topics you need to have covered for this. So thank you. Thanks. Oh, yeah, sure, sorry. The QR code. I just realized my plug's not working. My power's going to die soon. There we go. So there's the QR code. Yeah, please do provide, whoops, went too far. Please do provide feedback on that. I appreciate it.